Welcome back, Black Carnivores. Today, I have Dani Conway with us, who is a functional medicine coach and has been following the keto carnivore diet for 15 years. So, if you, and she is a functional medicine coach and she does a lot of different kinds of work. So, if you have questions about or struggling with infertility or PCOS, or you've been struggling with weight, especially after menopause, or you have some kind of autoimmune disease, or you have problems with digestion, this is the conversation for you. So let's see. We're going to talk to Dani about how a keto carnivore diet might help with these issues. And just to give you a little bit of background, Dani's personal journey into holistic health began 16 years ago with her own gut-wrenching experience of yo-yo dieting for years prior, as well as following the masses in the diet industry with a one-size-fits-all weight loss diet program. She was 65 pounds She was 65 pounds overweight and on a fat-free diet. And as a functional coach, she has helped tons of women implement this keto diet and carnivore diet approach correctly. So let's dive right in. So Dani, I would love to hear, some of your story, and then let us know how you even found yourself on the keto carnivore diet. I mean, 15 years ago, like, there were not many people talking about this or doing it. And then and then tell us what can we expect? I mean, I've been doing this 4 years. What does keto carnivore look like in year 1, 5, 10, 15? Should it be the same, different? Let us know the scoop, or the tea, as the young people say.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here. So yeah, my journey did start about 15 years ago. I mean, with dieting, it started 10 or 12 years prior to that. I was at my heaviest in my 20s, overweight, fat-free diet, had tons of hormone and digestive issues, normal blood work, the doctors telling me I was normal, but yet I still felt like crap, honestly. And I just wasn't willing to take that, to live like that forever. I mean, I was in my 20s and I was thinking to myself, like, if I feel like this in my 20s, like, am I even going to make it to my 40s? So that was a big thing. I mean, I'm 45 now. So that being said, I had just decided that I had done the fat-free thing. I had done the marathon cardio approach in the gym. I had done the chicken, brown rice, and broccoli from my personal trainer bodybuilding friends, and none of that worked. I'm sure a lot of people are like, yep, I've done that. So that being said, I just was like, well, the only thing I haven't done is this higher fat, eat fat, lose fat, or something approach. And again, back then, like, I was a little familiar with Atkins. I researched that a little bit, but there was if there was social media, I was unaware of it at that point. And I just felt like I was going to try something different. And if this didn't work, I didn't know what I was going to do, but what I was doing already didn't work. So it couldn't have been anything, what the heck, I might as well just try it. So,
that was back in like 2006, or?
Yep, exactly. 2006, about then. And one of the things I will share that my biggest struggle, or two of my biggest struggles, one of them was excessive hunger. And then the other one were like food, not cravings, not so much sugar cravings, but like food cravings. I craved fatty foods. I craved ice cream. So for me, it was like, oh my gosh, steak, cheese, so I started to eat those foods, and then that made it a little bit easier to start reducing the starchier foods, the Weight Watchers meals, like the ready 5-point meals, things like that I was trying. And so it just sort of like continued from there, reducing carbs, eating the, salads and lower glycemic veggies for my carbs, increasing the protein, increasing the good fats, learning, it was a big step for me to start eating fats, number one, and to really accept that, the whole eat fat, lose fat instead of eat fat, gain fat kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of huge mindset shifts that had to happen with that. And then, 2000, kind of fast forward a little bit, 2000, that was 2006, 2007, 8, and 9, just really got into this way of eating more, did more research, found, the name for it, the keto diet, low carb, that these things had been around for many, many years. and just sort of just continued from there. My experience I was always very protein heavy, meat based. I would go through periods where I would sometimes eat veggies and sometimes I wouldn't, but it never occurred to me that that was also a thing, like not eating vegetables. And then my first experience with like intentional carnivore was around 2012, 2013. If we fast forward my story a little bit, I had lost my weight, changed body composition. I was happy. I was maintaining for the first time ever in my dieting history. And then 2012, 2013, I decided I was going to get breast implants. And so part of my journey, just to let everyone know and fast forward, part of my journey is that I actually had them removed this 2021 March of this year because I had some problems. But that being said, I did also, those problems, unbeknownst to me, or I didn't want to admit it at the time, actually started within 3 weeks that I actually had the surgery. So because I had a lapse of digestive issues and things that came out of nowhere, or so I thought, I noticed that I felt the best on meat only, broth, animal fats, and vegetables. I didn't really feel that well eating. So that was my first introduction, if you will, into intentional carnivore.
So you were doing that in order to protect your implants.
Right. Because that makes sense, right? Because I was in full denial that I had just had the surgery. And of course, the doctor said, it can't be your implants. What do you mean? Right? Even though all this stuff started happening like literally 3 to 4 weeks from the surgery, which I'm happy to share about if you want to ask me questions. I'm totally open about it.
Wow. Well, that is quite that's a story. So so you just kept going with that? Like, did you worry about not eating vegetables, or did you just say, well, this is working, so?
No, I didn't. In fact, I added veggies back on and off multiple times. A couple years ago bought an air fryer so I could try to make vegetables more palatable. When air fryer became the craze, like 2.5 years ago about. And I was, in my coaching, my professional practice, I was teaching, from the spectrum of low carb to carnivore. So as you probably know, like not everyone has to omit vegetables. Like there are people out there that do just fine with veggies. So it was an on again, off again, and I would remove them and notice, changes. And then despite all the research I did, it was like, well, maybe, can't be me, that can't tolerate the vegetables. I'm sure you've heard that, or you probably experienced that in your own journey as well. So it was definitely an on again, off again. That's why I kind of say like my experience is really like both ketovore and carnivore for the most part of my journey.
Mm-hmm. Man, I wish that I had done this way earlier. I first heard about carnivore, I think it was like in 2007. And I remember thinking, this is crazy. But I was part of a message board and or a forum or something. And I stayed on it for like 6 months, like, reading and trying to like wrap my head around this. But, I had been so indoctrinated like everyone else that there are these super vegetables and I needed to have them. And so, I cared about my health and I cared about trying to do the things that I thought were healthy. And so, I made it my business to have, kale and spinach and broccoli and garlic and, those foods that they call superfoods. And I really tried to eat the rainbow. And so I finally decided like this thing that people say, or, this group of people was saying was so helpful, like it's just too crazy for me. And so I just walked away from it. And then, it was so many years later that I kept hearing about it, and I was like, let me just try this, like really try it. And the improvements were, night and day. It was like flipping a switch, it just really was so dramatic. So I can only wish that I had done it earlier.
Yeah, no. And there's a lot of things that I wish that I might have done differently, or, people ask me if I regret getting the breast implants, and, it's not that I can't say that I don't regret it, but I learned a lot from it. And now obviously like I can help a lot of people with that process. And there's things that I learned along the way that I never would have learned otherwise. So I just believe in like, rather than, I don't want to beat myself up or kind of look at the negative side of it, but always just take like the lessons from the experiences and then use that moving forward.
Hmm. Well, what do you wish you, or what do you wish you had done differently? I mean, or what have you learned that you would apply now that you didn't do in the beginning of your carnivore journey?
So I think, I would have probably started, my sort of approach, we talk about tracking macros because I know that's super, controversial in the carnivore space. I did track for a while, and that helped me get to a point of intuitive eating. So I actually would have done that a lot sooner rather than try to guess at what my body needed in order to kind of figure that out. My history was yo-yo dieting. It was restriction dieting. It was eat less to weigh less. So, in the beginning of the keto journey, I was still probably, at the very beginning, not eating enough as far as like my metabolism goes and muscle mass and, supporting an active woman with hormones and all of that. So I would have probably one of the big things is made sure that I was eating enough way earlier on rather than later on in the journey. So for me, that was a huge piece for me as far as like making sure I was eating enough and not under eating, which is of course common for us women.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. So under eating was an issue. How about making sure you were eating enough fat? Were you in the beginning, were you still being a little too lean, or were you okay with that?
So I was always okay with the fat. I just overall ate under ate, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
I loved butter. I love steak. I love the fat on meats. So I didn't intentionally try to eat lean per se. From early on, learning that energy has to come from somewhere. If it's not going to come from carbohydrates, it has to come from fat. So that's my biggest sort of um, qualm, if you will, with the leaner eating, because everyone's cutting fat and they're cutting carbs, and if you do that, you don't energy is we could argue that you get a little energy from protein, but the body still needs energy from somewhere, and so that's
Hmm.
where again the fat comes in, and the right amount for somebody's body and metabolism, they can still lose weight without having to eat super lean.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so what is different in your carnivore journey from like the beginning, year 1, year 5, year 10, year 15? Like how does it change, or does it change?
I think, that's a great question. I think some of it changes and evolves as this industry changes and evolves all the time. There's new research, there's new information. And then a lot of it has been around for a long time. I mean, look at how long the ketogenic diet has been around, right? So the principles the same, but I think the evolution of how I maybe implement it, or we buy meat in bulk, we have freezers, we have, I do batch meal prep and all of this stuff, but I had to learn along the way what was the best approach for me, how we budget for those things. All of that was sort of like not present in year 1 or probably year 5. I think that we started with our extra freezers in the garage maybe like in 2012, 2013. So that was 7 years of trying to figure out how to source the best meat. And meat was the main part of our meals, yet still battling a lot of the information that meat is unhealthy and things of that nature. So from like those kinds of things have sort of shifted and grown, if you will, as time has progressed into the types of, I guess you could say, habits or routine, if you will, that I'm in now in terms of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, what about, I mean, I also kind of wonder, I don't know about for the male body, but for the female body, 15 years is, that takes you through a lot of stages of life. And so are your needs different as perimenopausal or postmenopausal versus, in your 30s? And does that affect like the diet?
So I think our needs are different as far as stages of life. So in my practice, I work with women anywhere from 30, 35 into their 60s. So we kind of cover all of the stages. And I feel like it also is going to depend on their, women's activity level and the history of dieting that they have and what other things are going on. So that being said, I think it just, when we talk about like ratios of proteins to fat, and depending on hormone imbalances and digestive stuff that's going on, that's where those shifts can be made with higher fat versus higher protein, where they are in their cycle, how they're implementing. We haven't really talked about fasting, but fasting is very much hormones should be taken into consideration as far as fasting goes. I always have believed for myself and for women that they should prioritize getting the fueling part, the food part correct first before implementing any kind of fasting. Because the goal is balanced hormones and balanced gut, and balanced mood and better sleep and all of those things. So
how do you implement fasting? I mean, for the, Black carnivore community, there's a lot of people who do a range of different types of fast. What do you think is most effective? And do you, what do you think of extended fasts versus sort of time restricted eating? What do you think about that?
I think fasting is a tool. And I always think that fasting should be used in conjunction with, number one, however a person is eating, making sure that what they're doing in their eating window is correct and dialed in, if you will, for their body metabolism, whatever they have going on. And then taking fasting and looking at where their experiences are, where they're coming from, and what their goals are. So I do think for some people, intermittent fasting, I think is what you're referring to as like time restricted eating. I think that's beneficial for a lot of women and people in general, for hormonal reasons, for, resting digestion, in that anywhere from 12 to 18-hour range. And I think extended fasting has its place too. I think that overall, the body adapts. So it should never be 16-8 every day for 6 months straight. It should never be 48-hour fast 2 days a week, every week for 6 months straight. So it's all the adaptability with the seasons and hunger patterns and cycle. So, someone who's cycling regularly versus a perimenopausal woman and menopausal woman, all that whole cycling thing is going to look different for each woman. So again, like just sort of, I think, again, fasting is a tool and it can be integrated with whatever somebody has going on. It just has to be in the right context, making sure that they're not just relying on fasting like for weight loss per se, because that's like one of my biggest pet peeves. It's like, yes, it can help, but it's not the end all be all for weight loss, in general.
So I think that's really interesting that you say fasting has got to be, kind of dynamic, not the same thing, day in, day out for months at a time. So what do you say to people who love to do one meal a day, which is, essentially a 24-hour fast or 20-hour fast?
So, the first question I would ask them is it working for you? Are you hungry? How's your energy? Are you sleeping? Okay, that's like 4 things that I would say to them. What are their goals? Are they stalled with weight loss? Have they reached their body composition goals? What is their activity level? So I'm not saying that OMAD is bad necessarily, or any of these ways are bad. So I hope that part is clear. But if someone's been doing OMAD every day for 3 or 4 months, and the answers to any of those questions are not ideal for what their goals are, then that's when I would look at shifting something.
Hmm. Okay. So it can be fine, but if you're not, if you're not getting where you want to be, then that's something to look to change.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah.
Hmm. Okay. So, so to talk about some of the things that that you treat and address in your clients, like how does a carnivore diet affect, women's fertility and like PCOS and, or whatever other reasons there are for infertility? Why does a carnivore diet work, or why is it effective or helpful?
So as far as our hormones go, when we look at what are called the steroid hormones, so that's our cortisol, our adrenal system, DHEA, those hormone metabolites, sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. All those hormones are synthesized from cholesterol. Where do we get cholesterol? We get cholesterol from animal fat. Where do we get animal fat the most from? Carnivore diet, right? So that being said, that's where the benefits of carnivore come in for someone who's trying to rebalance hormones. They've got, hormone PCOS, infertility, food cravings that are related to adrenals. Cortisol and blood sugar have a very intimate connection as far as when they rise and fall throughout the day. So just from a hormonal standpoint alone, when we give the body the right building blocks, that's where we can get the most balance from.
Okay. And what about people who are struggling with weight, especially like after menopause, but even before? Like, where does the carnivore diet fit in there, and those pesky hormones?
Yeah.
Where does that fit in?
So, I mean, as far as looking at carnivore as like the most epic elimination diet to eliminate inflammatory foods, from sugar and refined carbohydrates to glutinous type foods to even, eggs and dairy if someone is intolerant to eggs and dairy or have like histamine type reactions. All of that is rooting back to removing those things that are causing the problems. And then the carnivore diet is the best approach in terms of animal foods, animal fats, getting enough overall as far as like getting the nutrients you need from the meat when you have to eliminate all of the other stuff because someone has so many intolerances or there's autoimmune stuff going on, immune imbalances, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. That's helpful. I mean, a lot of the women, there's a lot of women in the Black carnivore community who have a ways to go. They've got a lot of weight to lose.
Mhm.
They're dealing with diabetes, high blood pressure, and of course stress. So those are some pretty big obstacles.
Yeah.
Do you have a lot of experience treating women like that?
Yeah, I mean, I work with a ton of, women with blood sugar dysregulation, high blood pressure. It can be related to foods. It can be related to mineral imbalances. It can be related to leaky gut and other digestive issues. So all of those things are really like my goal is to get to the root cause of whatever's causing those problems. So with blood sugar dysregulation, that's present for years before someone's actually diagnosed with diabetes. So again, it just goes back to, my approach is always food first. So dialing in which carnivore foods are best for them, what ratios are best from proteins and fats. Some people are going to do better with higher fats. Some people are going to do better with a little bit more protein, making sure that, women are eating enough overall to support what's going on, to support the healing that has to take place like under the surface, so to speak. So really just that food first approach to rebalancing the hormones, the digestion. And then when I say hormones and digestion, that is ultimately the symptoms that people get diagnosed with, from the diabetes to high blood pressure to PCOS, autoimmune, Hashimotos, the list just goes on as far as the autoimmune stuff. So that's basically always my approach, regardless of whatever the diagnosis is always to get to the
Mhm.
root cause of the problem.
Well, how much is enough? How much food is enough? How much protein is enough? And how do you figure that out with somebody? Or how can someone figure that out for themselves?
Yeah, so if they're figuring out themselves, it's a little bit of experimentation, and watching what happens with your body. How much food is, really depends on what their activity level is. I mean, if we're gonna talk numbers, I'm not sure how your community feels about, macros and tracking, but if we just want to kind of, for example, talk about numbers, maybe it's 16 to 1800 calories, or maybe it's 1.5 to 2 pounds of meat a day, or maybe it's making sure that somebody kind of visually has half their plate filled with at least half their plate filled with a good portion of meat, and then they've added some fat to go with that. So there's different approaches, and I bring up these different kind of ways of looking at food because everyone is different, and tracking doesn't work for everyone, and eating intuitively doesn't work for everyone yet because they don't know what it feels like to eat based on hunger cues and things like that. So the visualization can work. Going by weight of actual meat can work. Tracking works for some people. So again, it's just really making sure that they're eating a minimum amount of food, some added fat, and then kind of watching, if you will, or feeling how their bodies respond from that point, and then making adjustments after that.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, I have people asking me, like how much I should eat. And I say, just eat until you're satisfied and you've had enough, and then come back for more, the next meal. And some people are fine with that and that works out, and other people not so much.
Right.
And I think that I also like to eat volume, and I don't think that that's actually great for me. And so I kind of think I need to rethink how much I'm actually having. So I'm kind of curious, like, how do you figure that out? And certainly, I don't want to lose muscle. So,
Mhm.
how much do you restrict before, you worry about that? So I'm curious. And I feel like I hear all of these great athletes and big men talking about you must have this amount of protein. And I'm like, that's great, but what does that have to do for a sedentary postmenopausal woman? Are your numbers, really relevant to somebody in my situation or someone like that, or not?
So I think that numbers can be relevant, and my baseline where I have women usually start off and then we make adjustments would be in the like 90 to 100 grams of protein. So that's macronutrient grams, not grams of weight, just to clarify the difference. Not like if you weighed it and it was 80 grams, it's actually the macronutrient grams. And then, adding a little bit of fat to that. I have people that start at basically a 1-to-1 ratio, and then meaning 50% protein, 50% fat. And then we'll kind of go from there as far as making adjustments. Going based off of hunger, this is where it does get a little
I'm
bit.
sorry, when you say 1-to-1, you mean 50% of the calories or 50% of the grams? Do you know what
Would
I'm saying?
Yeah, so it would be calories, but the grams would look different because fat has 9 calories per gram and
Right.
protein has 4 calories per gram. That makes sense?
Gotcha. Yeah.
Okay. So starting off there and then making adjustments. I think I started to say as far as like hunger goes, and you get into like insulin resistance, leptin resistance, hunger cravings, things like that. After that point of initially seeing how you do with the amount, like a set amount of food, let's say, then it would be making adjustments from there based on what's going on for somebody
Hmm.
and
Okay.
like underlying stuff.
Okay. That makes sense. And so, what would, what would be some signs that you're not doing well with the amount?
So not sleeping. So if I could give an example just personally, like for me, I don't sleep well if I eat less than 2,000 calories a day, approximately, which sounds
Oh,
like a lot for just, a female. I'm super active. I work out a lot. I ride horses. So metabolically, I need more fuel. And then I notice like if I start under eating for multiple days in a row, not intentionally, but just maybe I'm not as active, or like when it rains, I'm less active, things like that. Sometimes I can notice like, oh, my sleep was a little off, and I can go back and sort of course correct, if you will. And I sometimes notice like, oh, possibly I was under eating for a couple days, that kind of thing. So sleep is one thing to answer your question. Sleep, energy, cravings and hunger. So those can increase if somebody's not eating enough overall, or starting to notice like if imagining, but like the thoughts of other foods aside from carnivore foods, that's another indication that somebody might be under eating. So that can be common when maybe their hunger signals aren't super dialed in yet, or they're not, in touch with those hunger signals. Those thoughts of, other foods and snack foods and things like that creeping in, that can be another sign.
okay. Yeah, that's helpful.
Hopefully that makes
Um, yeah, it does. So you talked about autoimmune disease, and I'd love to hear more about that. I mean, and that seems to kind of run the gamut. Like I struggle, I struggled with asthma, eczema, and allergies, and early on in my carnivore career, so to speak, I gave up dairy, and it was like instantly the asthma, the allergies just gone. And I really have not used my asthma inhaler since that time. So I have completely cut out dairy, and I have not had it since. I did an experiment 4 times to make sure, because I like cheese
I
and
know.
dairy, and I did not want to let it go. But I did it, repeatedly, very carefully, under, pristine conditions, and it was clear that it was the dairy. There was no
Yeah.
question. So I haven't brought that back in, and but so it's amazing. I mean, I cannot believe how much benefit I have had as far as this autoimmune stuff goes. I still struggle with eczema. I mean, it's certainly better than it once was, but it is not, it's not gone by any means. So, I don't know if there's more to do with that. I took out. Great. I'm in New York. Sorry.
That's okay.
Maybe you can answer some of that, and I will mute, and we'll see when you're done answering what
Yeah,
the noise
definitely.
is like.
No worries. So with autoimmune, I mean, it does run the gamut, like you say. So the thing with dairy is it can be inflammatory and it can be irritating to the system. And so if the body doesn't like that, it's going to start to cause that immune system to want to attack and get rid of that somehow. So with autoimmune, it kind of goes back to carnivore being like the ultimate elimination diet, if you will, and being able to remove a lot of the foods that are causing the body to attack itself, whether it's an oxalate problem, a lectin problem, just an overall sensitivity or leaky gut problem that some of those carbohydrate foods, even if they're good carbohydrates, are contributing to. It completely takes that inflammatory load off the body, off the gut and the immune system. So our gut is, 90% of our immune system is actually our digestion. And so that's, one of the important factors of rebalance. When I say rebalancing the body from the inside out, that goes for the digestion as well as the hormones. And those two are actually very connected. But as far as, again, that autoimmune, like the dairy, removing dairy is also really important as far as like thyroid goes. And it just tends to be inflammatory for a lot of people and can cause all kinds of reactions. Now, in terms of, like you said, there's the group of people that just does carnivore, eliminates, maybe dairy, maybe eggs, or just, let's just say carnivore in general, and does really great and has a maybe complete turnaround with the symptoms that they're experiencing. Super common. Obviously, we hear tons of stories about that. And then we have another camp of people, and this is sort of where the functional medicine work comes in, where they may have gotten a percentage better, even 50 or 60 or 70%. So when I say percentage, realize like it could still mean significantly better, but there's still some lingering symptoms and lingering things happening, if you will, that maybe there's some underlying GI pathogens, parasites, bacteria, other type of imbalances that could be still contributing to some of those symptoms. And then, at the point at where someone is 50 to 60, 70, 80% better, that's where they decide, am I good with this? Do I just want to kind of ride it out and see what happens for a while if I stay eating this way? Or, am I going to seek out other, alternative ways of looking at things and figuring out like, I want to see the science. I want the lab testing. I want to get to the bottom of it. And then of course there are ways, there's ways to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess I wonder, I don't know, if there's more that I can do with my gut. I mean, I've, followed the carnivore diet. I've taken out the dairy. I think I've taken out the things that are irritating to me. Now, eggs is one of those things that like over my lifetime, I have periodically taken them out. So I think the first time I was 10 and I just found that it made me nauseous. So I just stopped eating eggs for like 10 years.
Oh, wow.
And so periodically I would add them back, and then, and so I would have them for a little while and then they would make me sick again. But then when I went keto, that was like when, I was able to eat eggs and it wasn't really a problem. And then, so periodically now I'll notice it. It's not as bad, but it'll be like, I'll feel a little nauseous. So then, I'll take them out. And now I'm like super careful about only having them infrequently and not, overloading, because I don't want to, ruin eggs, because they're super, they're tasty and it's super easy and it's like a great thing. So I kind of want to reserve them, so I don't have them that often. So I don't know. I mean, I wonder, what that does to the gut. Like, I feel like I've taken out, everything. I'm not even having herbs and spices. So I don't know. Is there more to do, or is that kind of it?
So skin and digestion are very connected. So bacterial or digestive bacteria and skin, like digestive bacteria or lack thereof can affect skin. Too much of the bad stuff, for lack of a better term, without getting into like pathogens and things like that, can affect skin. I think that obviously you've been doing the right stuff for a long time, and this could be the kind of thing where if you just ride it out and see what happens, it could potentially just continue to get better, or maybe there might be a little bit more work to do as far as like healing the gut. Do you do bone broth regularly? Because that's super healing. That can really help. Doing a little
actually never.
So okay,
never.
That's something that you can add.
I've been concerned about the histamines, because I feel, I mean, I do have a pressure cooker, and so I do, when I make it, I do that, so it's not cooking for as long, and I freeze it, right away, and I freeze it in like little ice cube trays so that I can take small amounts at a time. So I do that, but I don't love bone broth. But if it's, if it's helpful for this condition, then, I will make it my business to do that.
Yeah.
So
I think it's worth experimenting with, because it is, it's easy to add in if you do it the way you're describing it. You could do it in small amounts and see if you do have a reaction. And just, as far as leaky gut goes, like the super 30-second science lesson is like, if my fingers are like the villi of our digestive tract, and they're kind of all like this, and then what happens is, food goes through and we're supposed to absorb those nutrients through those villi. And that being said, when those villi get inflamed and those tight junctions loosen up and food starts getting through there, that's what causes leaky gut. That's what causes those food reactions and those other reactions that we're talking about, whether it's histamine or runny nose, headaches, constipation, diarrhea, all these subclinical type symptoms. And that bone broth can really help to reduce that inflammation in the gut. Now, obviously, if you have a histamine reaction, that's not going to be the most helpful food in the world. But that's why I think like doing a little bit of experimentation, especially someone in your case, you've done a lot of healing so far, not really sure if there's more you could do. It's just something that's really easy that you can implement and kind of test and see what happens.
Why would I still have leaky gut at this point? I mean, it's been like 4 years doing carnivore.
You know, if there was underlying pathogens, bacteria,
Oh. Oh,
imbalance of,
so bacteria could be doing it all on their own, let
yeah,
alone something I'm adding to. Okay.
right,
And
right.
I definitely felt like I had systemic yeast. Like I was always getting yeast infections, and I kind of felt like I had a constant yeast infection that would have flare-ups. And
Mhm.
so I would try, I'd get the doctors to give me like diflucan and stuff. But I talked to one, gynecologist, and I was like, we gotta have some other plan. Like, what is the problem here? And she was like, I don't know, maybe get some probiotics and, just take a lot of them. So
Yeah, so
that's it.
that's a good question. It was, and Candida kind of falls under that pathogenic type category. So in those cases, that would be something specific to, learn what's going on and then do some type of an herbal protocol. So I know you don't eat plants, and carnivores don't eat plants in general, but uh, oregano oil and things that are capsulated in very strong and small amounts that can be used therapeutically, they can have a lot of benefit for many people if they're willing to go that route.
Yeah. Well, I found once I went carnivore, all of that stopped. I haven't had a yeast infection since.
Oh, that's great.
I All those medications, I had been stockpiling diflucan, and all of that has just been sitting in my cupboard, expiring. So it was, yeah, that was, really big. It was a very dramatic change. But and as far as the herbal stuff, I mean, like, I certainly would hope that everybody watching knows that, like, medicine, herbs can be a wonderful forms of medicine, and we do use medicine. So if there are herbal remedies that
That's
you
a
think
much
might
better
work,
option. Yes, definitely.
yeah, please use them. Like, just don't eat them for dinner.
Right.
um
I always say
yeah.
like you're not gonna eat a bowl of oregano oil. Trust me on that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, and as far so as digestion goes, oh, actually, I had one more question about autoimmune. So I hear people talk about Hashimoto's a lot, but I don't hear about it talked. I don't hear as many women in the Black community talking about it, and I wonder if you have noticed in your clients, like, is there a disparity in, who is getting Hashimoto's, and why do you think that might be?
Gosh, I can't say that I have noticed as far as that goes, honestly. So I'm actually not sure. I think with thyroid antibodies, thyroid imbalances, a lot of people, and I'm sure you've heard out there, like a lot of people tend to like, there's a lot of blame on low carb eating as far as thyroid stuff goes, but really what it comes down to is under eating. So under eating tends to be more of the root cause of thyroid imbalances starting than anything else that I've ever seen. And so I think that's important because there are so many people that have had improvement in their thyroid conditions with, carnivore, keto, and low carb, honestly. So when you remove the right foods, when you remove the dairy and you remove all that inflammation, all that inflammatory stuff, and then eat the right foods to support that hormone balance, that's what can tend to, make the biggest difference.
Mm, that makes sense. Yeah, I think that I don't know, there's not as much of a practice of under eating, I guess, amongst Black women. So I wonder if that accounts for the difference. Um, so that would be interesting to
That
know.
makes sense. Yeah, that definitely makes sense.
Hmm. So and then let's go actually back to the digestion. So, I mean, that's obviously a problem for a ton of people. There's tons of people who struggle with IBS and all kinds of things. So, do you find like a carnivore diet is, or a meat heavy diet is just is good in like every case? Like, is it immediate, the benefits, or what do you think?
I think that, so, I mean, I fully believe that meat-based, meat-heavy diet is good for many people, for many cases. So that being said, when we look at just various imbalances, like depression and anxiety are digestive issues just as much as constipation, bloating, and diarrhea are digestive issues. And the reason for that is because our brain chemistry, our neurotransmitters, are made from amino acids. Where do we get amino acids from? Protein. Where do we get protein from? Our diet. What happens if we have leaky gut and digestive issues and we can't absorb our nutrients? Mood problems, digestion issue, bloating, constipation, diarrhea, depression, anxiety. So that's all like a feedback loop, basically. So as far as meat heavy diet being beneficial, most definitely for digestive issues. Now, when it comes to actual digestion, especially when somebody is first starting and maybe their digestion is compromised, that's where maybe someone doesn't do so well on OMAD because they just can't tolerate all of their daily food in one sitting. So breaking that up into 2 to 3 meals a day so that they can absorb nutrients, they don't have a problem with eating all that fat in one sitting. They can, start to just feel a little bit more balanced and even throughout the day. And then getting to a point where, if they wanted to reduce their amount of meals, they definitely could. But I don't believe that everyone should not be eating 3 meals a day. Like, a lot of people have goals of not being hungry. And I don't really, this kind of a side note based on to your question, but I think it's important to note that, like, not being hungry almost ever should never be the goal. Like, it's okay and healthy to have healthy hunger cues. And I think, like, just coming from a place of excessive hunger in my dieting career, like, of course I never wanted to be hungry. Like, that was my ultimate goal, but that really wasn't the goal. It was more about being satisfied with food and making sure that my body was well nourished rather than just not being hungry, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely eat 3 meals a day. So I wanted for a while to do the, OMAD thing, but like, yeah, I mean, trying to sit down and eat 2 pounds of meat, like, it's just, and it's not fun. I didn't think
Yeah,
it
I
was
mean,
fun.
it doesn't feel it though. The goal, like, if it works for you, great, but you shouldn't not be feeling well, right? That's not our goal, of course.
Yeah, yeah. My co-host, I do a live stream every Thursday, and my co-host Arian, I guess he was diagnosed with IBS, but he kind of just fell into carnivore. He didn't know about it before. It was just like he would get, like crippling pains when he ate, various things, and
Mhm.
like, gas pains and all this other stuff. And so he just kind of by experimenting discovered like meat was the only thing that didn't upset his stomach. And
Right.
so that's what he ate. And so he just kind of became carnivore. And then after doing some Googling was like, oh,
This is a
there's
thing.
other people. Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, man, that's awesome. Because most people would struggle for years,
Mhm.
decades. I mean, I can't believe how long I struggled with like, my breathing and my allergies. And if I had just known that taking that out would have turned things around, that would have been fantastic. And the only reason I continued to look around for other dietary stuff was, I was on keto and I was doing great. I was losing weight, and I was improving.
Mhm.
I had more energy and more brain clarity, but I wasn't doing as great as some other people who were like, oh my God, this miraculous thing happened. And that stuff wasn't happening. So that's why I kept like looking at videos and talking to people and trying to kind of see what was going on. And then, and so when I like tried carnivore, on day 2, I mean, I just felt so amazing that I was just like, oh my God. And I think when I first started, I did like a beef and butter thing. And
Right.
so, I'd taken out all the dairy and everything. And I did it no salt too. I don't know why, but I thought that you had to do it that way. But I just felt amazing. And I'm sure that in part that was because I had also taken out the dairy.
Right.
And if I had known, I feel like all of these years, I sort of wasted trying different things like taking echinacea, getting like acupuncture, getting massages, and
Oh,
trying
girl.
all of these other things, you know.
Let me talk about acupuncture for a second, because
Mhm.
going back to, if you don't mind, if I could bring up the breast implants again.
Mhm.
So, like I said, I started having some issues like within weeks of having the surgery, and of course, couldn't have possibly been the cause. I mean, I spent thousands of dollars on acupuncture trying to fix the things that were caused by the implants, but you know, to my dismay, didn't want to admit that. But I can
Mhm.
also relate too, because like I said, that was about the time where I was like, okay, I'm going to try to take out the vegetables and see what happens. I definitely noticed a significant difference. And I mean, I was, in practice at that point, 6, 7 years already. And even when you know the things and you do the research, it's still hard sometimes to accept, like we were talking about earlier, like, could I possibly would be one of the people that feels well without vegetables? Could that possibly be the case? And so I can relate. It can be, as far as like feeling challenged, and if I had only done things sooner, but say la vie, I guess
Yeah.
that's part of the journey and part of the story, right?
I know. I guess I wouldn't be here if I had done this so much earlier because it would have felt great. But part of the reason I started my channel and I started doing this and talking about this is that, I struggled for so long, trying to do everything exactly right as I was told in the magazines, on TV, wherever.
Mhm.
I tried to do all of those things and nothing worked. And I felt like, just so despondent that I just could not make progress on my health and weight goals. And to learn that I just did not have the right information. Like I was just doing things that were completely wrong and or completely antithetical to my goals. And to learn that there is this other way that is easier,
Mhm.
tastier,
Right.
more
Delicious.
satisfying and more filling. It was like, oh my God, what have I been wasting all this time for?
I know, and I can totally like relate, because one of the reasons I got into practice is because I felt after I like got over, like, actually lost the weight and kept it off, and then started to explore the hormone and digestive and the underlying cause, the functional medicine part of it for myself. I was like, it was like the light bulb went on of like, there's no way that you're the only woman struggling with no answers. Like, there has to be other women out there that are in the same boat. They've done the dieting thing, they don't know what to do next, their hormones are messed up, their gut feels awful, but they're out of options, right? So that was basically like kind of like how my calling started, beyond the nutrition part of it, just because again, I was like, there has to be, I can't be the only person having these imbalances and these issues.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you are bringing, the information out there, and I, strive to make sure that more and more people know that this is an option. I mean, I've always liked meat, so when I learned that I could eat it, especially red meat, it was like, oh, amazing. So I was so pleased. And I think, there's a level of satisfaction with eating, especially eating animal fats, that you just don't get otherwise. And when
No.
I first got, I got beef fat trimmings and fried them up and ate them. I mean, the feeling of satisfaction was like nothing I'd ever felt before.
It's
And
like
it was
the
like,
physical, it's like
oh,
such a physical feeling versus
mhm.
finishing a big bowl of even like a
Salad.
salad. Even on keto, a salad with some meat on it and maybe some avocado. The
Mhm,
satisfaction is so much different. It's like in your blood almost.
mhm. Yeah. And I loved how, when I would eat that, like I could feel so full and satisfied without my stomach stretching.
Yes.
And I liked that. Like I really don't like that feeling of my stomach really being stretched out far. And so it was nice, to be on carnivore and be able to eat differently. So there were just so many different things. Like it's a very, very different experience. It doesn't feel like any other way of eating.
No, I definitely agree with you on that for sure.
Hmm. Yeah. So how about your family? Did they get on board? Do you have kids? Do they eat this way too?
So my kids have four legs. We have a dog and I have a horse.
So
So
they do eat this way. One does.
does. The other
Yeah.
one does not, and that's okay. But so let's see. My husband, by proxy, he eats this way. So when we first got married, we've been together 16 years, celebrating 15 years of marriage this year. He was about 60 pounds overweight. He lost
So
probably
you guys got together or you got married right as you were starting this.
yeah, so yes, exactly. So we got married, we met in 2006. I was sort of had just started onto the low carb keto train at that point. And then we were married in 2007. So when we got married, I was sort of like halfway to my weight loss goal, if you will. And then so he started, I actually didn't even hardly cook when I got married. So all the cooking that I do with the food prep and meat prep, like it's all self-taught. I even used to apologize to him when we first got married, like, I'm sorry, I'm like not really a good cook. But I just sort of learned along the way, and our grocery shopping shifted, and he, ate what I made and loved meat, so really didn't mind it. And so he eats like I eat. Like I said, we don't have kids. My mom is very much low carb most of the time, sometimes, more keto now than she has ever been. My dad, not so much. We don't live close to them. They're uh, not together, but they live in Southern California. And so my, immediate family, which is my husband, yes, he eats like this and, loves meat and has totally adapted this way of eating. So I'm very lucky. I know there's a lot of spouses and partners out there that don't support their significant others. But I love that he does support, how we eat and, you know, budgeting for the meat and, making sure that we have freezer space and all of that. So,
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm really, that's amazing to hear. My family thinks I'm crazy, but I'll have the last laugh. I'll be the last one standing, I guess.
right, right.
Yeah. So, do you feel like you have conquered your health, or have you, fully recovered from? I mean, now that you've had the implants out, do you feel like you've gotten rid of all of the effects, or what?
Good question. So I had the implants out March of this year. And I can honestly say, like, I feel amazing. And I still think I have a little bit of work to do, just to be completely honest and upfront. My thyroid markers, they're still not where I would like them to be. They are the markers that when I had blood work prior to getting them out, was kind of like the red flag of like, I have been eating this way for years. I've been doing all of the things, for years. Why are these markers still a little bit off? So that was kind of like my alarm, if you will, that said, like, I had been thinking about removing them for probably a year and a half prior. That's where I said, okay, I just need to do this. So since March, I have, I feel like a new person, honestly, without them in my body. And like I said, my thyroid markers just aren't exactly where I'd like them to be. So I'm definitely working on getting them there.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I'm glad to hear it, and I wish you, continued improvement and so on. So yeah, that's fantastic.
Thank you
Um,
so much.
mhm. And I just, continue to, I will try having more of the bone broth and see, if that can help. I like doing the carnivore diet, and I'm not a person that likes to, take a lot of supplements and do a
Mhm.
lot of stuff. So it's always been, kind of hard for me to consider doing more. But bone broth is
Well,
just
I also,
sipping. I can do
I
that.
also think that what we do has to be sustainable. So if you feel, like I said, give it time, just give it more time. See if what you're doing, continues to improve. Um, when I work with clients, like I always want to take them from where they are to where they want to go, never from where they are to where I think they should go, because that never works, right? It's always
Yeah.
about the individual person, their individual goals, what they want to achieve, and then going, kind of going after it from there. So, you've had such great results so far, honestly. Obviously you've shared that. So I would just try the little things with the bone broth and see how that goes, and just continue. Eat meat, be happy.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been doing a monthly challenge with folks, or a 21-day challenge to help people kind of like get started and keep going and stay motivated on the carnivore diet. And I love it. And I feel like, it's helped a lot of people. But what would you suggest if someone's just getting started in that 21 days? Like, I definitely tell people who are, really new, like, don't fast, just eat fatty meat, like, relax and enjoy the process, and you're going to have some transition, but, take your electrolytes and so on. What would you say though?
Yeah, so I think that there's as you well know, there's two ways to approach it. One could be the cold turkey off of everything, just going straight into, meat. And the other one can be the gradual approach. And I think that there's benefit to both methods depending on the person. I think that there's some people that could potentially get really sick if they just jump in cold turkey. And there's others that do great with that. So I think listening for somebody to just really accept who they are and where they are, and go with what feels the best without being pressured to go in either direction, if you will.
Hmm.
That I think is the best approach. And then I am definitely, I love salt, electrolytes. They work for me. I still use them daily. No, not everyone needs them, but they are so helpful in the beginning too, to make that transition easier. Making sure that whichever way you go, you're eating enough, because like I always say, even if you're eating carnivore food, if you're not eating enough, you're still on a restricted diet, right? And that's not our goal for carnivore. So that's, my approach as far as just getting started.
Hmm. And what about people who want to try a protein sparing modified fast? What do you think of that?
So definitely not in the beginning, number one.
Hmm.
And number two, I think that, you know, let's face it, it works for some people, but my biggest thing with the protein sparing is that energy comes from fat or carbs. And if we reduce carbs and we reduce fat, where are we going to get most of our energy from? We can get some of it, a little bit can come from protein, but protein is really the building blocks for our body. So with that being said, if someone does want to do that type of approach, I will have them, maybe not do it every day, or maybe eat leaner meats on some days, making sure to add a little bit of fat, but not reducing the fat too much, because then we get into cravings and hormone imbalances and just exacerbating the problems that have gotten people to this way of eating in the first place. So all of that needs to be taken into consideration.
Yeah. Well, people say to me, well, energy comes from, carbs or from fat. And so if I reduce the carbs and the fat, it'll be forced to come from my body fat. And I say, I don't know. It seems like there is a limit to how much body fat your body can burn, like at any given minute. And if you are, if your needs are exceeding what's possible, then, that equation doesn't work. And I don't know.
Yeah. And
do you think there is a limit?
Yeah. So here's my other problem with that. And with the whole leaner, I should say, thing, is that we cannot get our nutrients that we need from the fat on our bodies. So if our goal is hormone balance, and we talked about the steroid hormones when we first started chatting, the adrenal hormones, cortisol, DHEA, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, those hormones cannot balance without cholesterol, and that comes from dietary fat. We can't get our nutrients daily and fat soluble vitamins from the fat on our bodies. So to say that we are going to get, our fat or burn the fat for fuel, like it doesn't really completely equate.
Okay. And have you ever worked with someone who has done the paleo ketogenic diet? You know what I'm talking about? The PKD?
Yeah, it's like as far as like a paleo approach to keto, is that what you mean?
No, there's a clinic in Hungary that has a specific way of doing a carnivore diet where I think you're limited to like 500 grams of protein, and you have a lot of fat. So, you're eating like 80% of your calories maybe from fat. And and you're required to have like bone marrow or brains or liver every day, some amount.
So I have not, but as far as like ratios go, some of my clients, especially the like menopausal stage, I tend to sometimes put them in the 70-75% of fat range. And we do try to get sometimes some marrow, make sure they're getting beef fat. Not all my clients want to eat organ meat, so brains is sometimes out of the question. But that being said, sometimes the higher fat approach does work for, the hormone imbalances or the menopausal stage.
Okay. So higher fat can really be helpful for some people.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely think so, for sure.
Okay. Yeah. So when I've tried the low fat approach, I found, I got more and more depressed, but didn't notice it happening. It was just very, very kind of a subtle decline. And then I had some short ribs, and after about 20 minutes after I ate them, it was like angels are singing. Yes, literally it was like that. And I was just like, I don't understand why I'm just so happy right now. Like nothing in my life has changed.
Right.
So why?
Yeah, for me too, that's the first thing. If I don't get enough fat, my mood starts to tank like right away.
Yeah. So that's what I've noticed. And then the people that I've worked with, I've noticed that they just get they're just more likely to have a binge or, to fall off track. And so that's why I worry about people doing the protein sparing modified fast. It might work if you can stay on it, but I feel like sometimes some people, who are doing great, and then all of a sudden they've eaten the entire kitchen and they're like, I don't know what happened. Like, I was walking to the bathroom and now there's chocolate all over my hands.
No, I totally agree with that. And I mean, for me, like I've just had so much success not having to have clients like reduce their fat to that extent. I think there's just so many other ways of hacking for weight loss, so to speak, than doing that are super effective, and where you don't have to compromise your cognition your energy, your mood, especially. Those of us that have been on 1200 or 1000 calorie diets, like we know what it's like to be in a crappy mood because of, restricted diet, restricted eating kind of thing. So I'm super sensitive to that because I get a lot of women that have come from that place and they're like, I know I need to eat more, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to figure it out kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, man, you have given me lots of great advice, and I've really enjoyed talking to you. So, if people want to work with you, where do they go? How do they find you?
So on Instagram, I'm at carnivore.keto.fitness. My website as well is nutritionthenaturalway.com. So either way, I coach. I do group coaching in an online community. I also, of course, have one-on-one in my practice. So just reach out, and I'm happy to answer questions and share more information. I do a lot of videos in my stories and share my meat prep and meal prep and all of that stuff too. So.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. I really have enjoyed this conversation. And, is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
Gosh, I just want to thank you for having me. I love your channel. I love I love all your videos. So, yeah, I just hope that everyone has a great New Year's and, get after those goals. Oh, you know what I can share? Because I'm about to release another ebook, the
Oh, wow.
2022 Guide to Taking Action. So one of the things that we all know about New Year's is, of course, New Year's resolutions are, few, here and there, whatever your thing is. I'm not big on resolutions, but where I see, I love goals, but where I see a lot of clients kind of falling short is not so much making the goals, because we're all really good at creating goals. But we tend to, where we fall short is the action to actually make those goals happen. So that's what this guide is going to be about, is actually taking the right action to make the goals happen. So I'm happy to share the link with you as well if anyone wants to grab that when it's available.
Oh, please. Yes, absolutely. And I'll add it to the description.
Okay, cool.
All right. Well, thank you, Black Carnivores, for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed it. And I will see you all next week. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks again.